Welcome again to Drinks with John. I am joined this afternoon by someone I have known a long time, good friend of mine, and one of the most eminent prelates, not simply of the church in Africa, but of the entire Universal Church, Cardinal John Onaiyekan of Abuja, the capital city of Nigeria. Cardinal Onaiyekan, how you doing today?
Very well.
Welcome to Drinks with John. Can I toast to you? Chin chin.
This is the third day.
So let's set the scene for people who are watching. Cardinal Onaiyekan and I are together at this major Rome summit called African Christian Theology, Memories and Mission of the 21st Century, being held, sponsored by the Center for Ethics and Culture at the University of Notre Dame and being held at Notre Dame's Global Gateway Center here in Rome, bringing together a cross-section of prelates and theologians and laity and clergy and religious. Just for the record, this is being billed as a sort of pan-African event, although I think it's fair to say the preponderance of participants are actually Nigerian. So it's sort of more like Nigeria talks about Africa. But in any event, we are honored to be joined by Cardinal Onaiyekan. Now, I want to warn you at the top that this is going to be a difficult interview for me because I have known you long enough that my temptation is to do nothing more than spend the next 15 minutes telling John Onaiyekan stories.
Talking about me.
Yeah, exactly. But that's probably not what people are tuning in for. They want to hear from you, not from me.
Yes, indeed.
So we're going to talk about the meeting, of course. But as an American, I cannot resist but begin with this question. In the United States, we have a new president. What does Africa make of Donald Trump?
Oh, I'm not sure I can even answer that question because, first of all, Donald Trump was a great surprise.
Hey, to us too.
We're not expecting. We thought he was not serious. I didn't know that, or that if he was serious, the Americans were more serious than that. But then it turned out that he's now your president, and the only thing anybody knows now about Trump in Nigeria is the fact that some Nigerians were denied entry into the United States a week or two ago. So that has raised a lot of concern. As for the performance of Donald Trump since he got into office, there's not much echo in Nigeria. Some Nigerians are looking for, hoping that there may be some change, some shift in American policy, since Trump has promised that he was going to do things differently. Whether these changes are going to be better for Nigeria or not, we still don't know.
But what sort of shifts were they hoping for from Trump? Nigerians.
Well, they would be perhaps hoping for a better relationship between the United States and Nigeria. They'll be hoping perhaps for those who look up to the United States of America to help deal with our problems with the Muslim terrorists.
Right.
And they will hope that maybe Trump will be less cautious.
Less inhibited.
Less cautious than Obama in reaching out to helping our government to deal with this menace. But so far, not much has happened.
Yeah. So basically, you would say not much. People don't know a great deal about what he's doing.
We're waiting.
And so they haven't formed firm conclusions one way or the other.
We're waiting, yes.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about the other truly riveting figure on the global stage, a man who captured the attention of the world 4 years ago and has held it ever since, and that is Pope Francis. What do Nigerians make of Pope Francis?
First of all, the Nigerians love the Pope. Any
Pope.
Yeah. Any Pope. And so they carry this great love of the Pope also to Pope Francis. I am not sure that generally Nigerians will be weighing his speeches, his teachings in any way or the other. No. I realize that some of his statements has endeared him somehow to some of my Muslim friends.
Really?
Especially when the Pope came out very clearly rejecting any suggestion that Islam is a terrorist.
Yeah, he said there is no such thing as Islamic terrorism, right? Yeah.
And many of my Muslim friends were very, very happy to hear that said. They were happy to hear that said because that goes completely contrary to the narrative that you are getting in many Christian circles. Beyond that,
were you happy to hear that?
Well, was I happy to hear that? Yes, yes. But again, it's like Pope Francis does. Is a prophet. He makes a statement, but that statement has to be unpacked.
Yeah.
So, having said that, then it was now left to us to say, yes, Islam is not a terrorist religion. But still, we still have to deal with the fact that most of our terrorists are Muslims.
Right.
So that is up to us then too. But I must say that kind of statement helps me in my conscious and determined effort to keep reaching out in good relationship with my Muslim friends.
And in that sense, Pope Francis helps.
Yes. In that sense, it helps. And many Muslim friends constantly compare the Catholic Church favorably as against some other Christian churches who have a rather strong anti-Muslim language.
And in the Nigerian context, would that mean above all the Pentecostals?
Very often, yes. Yeah. Very often, yes.
Okay, listen, we're talking about Pope Francis. You heard this morning your good friend, Father Paulinus Odazur, give a paper on Amoris Laetitia.
Yes, Amoris Laetitia.
Now, you know how Amoris has been received in the West, in places like Europe, in the United States. It's unleashed a ferocious debate over this particular question of communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics. Is that debate going on in Africa?
Let me just go back first that Paulinus failed to tell you that Amoris Laetitia was published when I was in his house.
Is that right?
In Notre Dame. He first saw the first clips and got very, very worried. Because as usual, the first clips were the sections which the press decided to take up.
Right.
Which practically said Pope Francis has completely changed the name of the game.
Right.
I told Father Baldazo, let's wait and get the full story. And indeed, I was still in his house when I was able to access the full encyclical. And precisely because of this, I spent almost the whole night reading through the whole encyclical.
Yeah.
And after I'd read through the whole thing, I told Paulinus, don't panic.
Don't calm down.
Calm down, don't panic. There's nothing categorical that the Pope Francis has said, which is, as it were, turning around any of the major positions of the church on marriage and marriage morality, because the essentials of Catholic marriage morality was repeated severally in the first few chapters. The section that probably worried that were a cause for questioning was the last part,
Chapter 8,
where he was specifically talking about problem situations. And I said, this is what we have to do now. He has recognized that there are problems. And for us who are on the ground, we are happy that the Pope knows that we are meeting with problems on the ground.
Right.
And that we are grappling with it just as he is doing. And that there's nothing that the Pope has said which we have not been more or less walking along that line. Namely, that a man and a woman are in an irregular condition does not mean that they are excommunicated. We've always found a way of welcoming them. Maybe with the Amoris Laetitia, we will find a better way of welcoming them. On the other hand, we still let them know that receiving Holy Communion is an external expression of our faith. We cannot judge what is inside your heart. So we must make rules that determine who receives communion and who does not. And our people are aware that this is the rule. So I think that what the Amoris Laetitia has done for us is to highlight the plight of these people and to help us to, as far as possible, avoid talking about them in any way that will be spiritually condescending.
Right.
And finding a way of actually making them feel at home. I like the expression of the Pope that they are not, by that fact, excommunicated. Now, to say somebody is not excommunicated does not mean that he can receive communion.
Right.
Even though...
And now listen, Paulinus told us that in Africa, there is no debate over that issue of communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics because it's settled and everybody accepts that. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. It is true. Not only for divorced and remarried, but also polygamists.
Sure, because that's that's really the other problem you have to deal with.
That is the case
right?
we have more.
Yeah.
Let's just put it this way. Now in Africa, as far whether you are Catholic or a non-Catholic, we just believe that there are certain rules which you must follow. And in fact, our church is it famous? Is it notorious for having very clear rules?
Yeah, fair to say.
Yeah. They say the Catholic Church is very. When they use the Catholic Church rigid, they are not saying it in a negative way.
Africans, you mean?
Yes.
Because Westerners usually are.
No, we say rigid means, oh, these people know, at least they have clear rules.
So they know who they are.
Yes. Yeah. And if you're a Catholic, you follow the rules as Catholic. You know how far you can go and how far you cannot go. And those who are not Catholics, we say, oh, the Catholics, they have their own rules. Their rules are always stricter than that of other Christians in the area of marriage. So from that point of view, big debates within the church on this matter, well, it's not really the case. There may be some theologians here and there who may make certain statements, but definitely you won't hear it much from bishops' conferences reacting against Pope Francis.
And I take it also you wouldn't hear it much from ordinary people in the pews.
Some people, if I can say, I remember one gentleman, a week after the Amoris Laetitia, wrote me a long letter and asked me, I hope you have read the latest encyclical of the Pope. Can you imagine that? And I don't even know the man from Adam. He says, I hope you have read Amoris Laetitia. And he told me that he hopes that you bishops and you priests will now start using the language of Pope Francis.
Yeah. In other words, why can't you be more like Francis?
Yes, I was quite.
Right? Our bishops get that all the time.
I was rather impressed.
Yeah.
That if I had not had the challenge to read this when I was in Notre Dame with my brother Paulinus, I would probably still have kept the book in the shelf.
Yeah.
But I had read the whole thing.
Yeah.
She had read the whole thing.
Okay, I'm not going to tell the Pope you don't normally read his documents. That'll be our secret. Okay.
I tried to do.
Okay.
I certainly read the whole of Laudato
Sure, of course you did. Okay, so just shifting gears, okay. Whenever we talk about I should say, I've been covering the church for 25 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Over that arc of time, normally when we talk about Catholicism in Africa in the media, okay, the issue that inevitably comes up sooner or later is HIV/AIDS and the church's teaching on contraception.
It came out today.
Came out a little bit today, but there hasn't been a whole lot of conversation about it here. But that issue continues to come up in a lot of public conversation and media debate and so on. Now, I know over the years when you and I have talked about this, and I've asked you about it, what you have consistently said is that the African experience shows that the ABC approach works to fighting HIV/AIDS, and your frustration is that everybody wants to focus on C, but they don't want to talk about A, which of course is abstinence, right, and so on. So, I mean, that's been your argument, right? That why do you focus only on this one piece of the puzzle? Is that still where you are in thinking about this?
First of all, it's still where I am. And secondly, in the meantime, a lot of water has passed under the bridge. And we have actually found out that when it comes to public health approaches, countries that have gone all out promoting condoms have had to deal with serious, more grievous crisis on HIV and AIDS. And if I may mention a country, I take South Africa.
Yeah.
South Africa is a country which went all out, distributing condoms to all and sundry in order to contain HIV and AIDS. And they were always having the highest level, despite condoms. The other example I give is Uganda.
The famous one, of course. The pioneer at ABC,
Yes,
right?
Uganda, which did not condemn condom, but put a lot of effort into all the efforts to encourage young people to change behavior.
Right. So the abstinence before marriage and fidelity inside marriage. That's the
Yes.
A and the B. of the
Yes,
formula.
yes. And they have worked with religious institutions to carry this message. And I'm talking of Uganda because this is a case which everybody has seen, that it is not true that it does not work.
Yeah.
That it did work there. Now, when you come to my country, Nigeria, we are somewhere in between. The government is a little bit restrained in its pushing of condoms. It supports our efforts to insist on abstinence and change of behavior. I speak often to the young people, and I tell them that the invention of condom seems to have ushered in an era of sex without consequences.
Yeah.
I say, but HIV/AIDS is now raising the fact that it is no longer business as usual. That's the way I approach to them. Say, please now, it is no time to just sleep around carelessly.
And you find they buy that?
They listen. From then you could tell them, you might decide that you're going to sleep around because you want to, but please don't forget that there's consequence. And but you don't really have to, You could try and just abstain.
Right.
And if anybody comes and tells you that you are incapable of being responsible in this matter, that person is not respecting you.
The other piece of this puzzle...
And it worked. It
worked.
And especially when it is no longer me who is preaching this, but when young people among
Preach it to
themselves,
each other.
one another, we encourage very much this peer group relationship. And this is quite even independently of our Catholic doctrine on condoms. Quite independently for two reasons. First, the fact that the question of HIV and AIDS is a matter of life and death, like that lady said, and that we are concerned that not only that Catholics do not die of HIV and AIDS, but also that no Nigerian should die
Right.
of HIV and AIDS.
Right.
So for us, we see our position as our own contribution towards helping our nation. Then there is the other aspect of whether condom is a perfect solution. Whether it is well known that it is not 100% effective, and especially condoms and the way it comes out in the villages of Africa.
Yeah, you've said this before,
Yes,
okay?
yes. So
No, wait a minute. Let's unpack that point. When these Western NGOs or whatever, want to send condoms to Africa. I mean, you've told me before, these are not necessarily the brand new... Fully, I mean, your point is that they're often secondhand and old, and sometimes they're sitting on docks for a long time.
For a long time.
And by the time they reach you, I mean, let's assume the typical condom has a 96, 97% success rate. That's not where it is by the time it reaches you.
Exactly.
Right?
Apart from the time it spends in the wharf, the whole chain of distribution
Stretches out the
and
time.
they are carrying them in small packets to small corner shops and markets and so on. And anything goes.
Can happen.
Anything can happen. So we are not even thinking of something that is really reliable. The issue that came out about condoms and what they call discordant couples.
Yes.
A man and a woman, one is positive, the other is negative.
Let's just unpack that for people who are watching. A discordant couple means you've got a man and a woman, one is HIV positive, the other isn't. And the question is, in that context, could the church approve the use of contraception, not to prevent the transmission of life, but to prevent the transmission of disease?
Of death.
Yeah, of death.
Mm-hmm. In that regard, we have always distinguished between first, distinction between condom as contraceptive and condoms as preservative. And the clear doctrine of the church that condemns condoms as contraception. I do not believe that there is any clear doctrine that will condemn condom for the preservation of life. That could still be left as an open question. That is, presuming it actually preserves life.
Well, I think that's the official status of it. That's an open question.
Yes, but the other distinction I make, especially when you're talking of public policy, public health issues, we have to distinguish between when you are talking of a man and a woman who have both the right and the duty to have sexual relations with one another. You must distinguish that scenario from the whole question of distributing condoms indiscriminately to students and small boys who are not married, and who we are talking now about morality, who morally have no business with sex in the first place.
Right.
And I think these distinctions are often not brought out when we are discussing this HIV and AIDS issue.
Well, the other thing I wish we had time to pursue is that the other piece of this puzzle, of course, when people want to criticize the church's position on condoms in the context of HIV/AIDS, what often gets left out is that in Africa especially, the church is the primary caregiver for people who are suffering with HIV.
Oh, that's the other issue. That it's as if the only way to deal with HIV is to distribute condoms. But we know that that's not true. It's just one part of the whole story.
And the point is, no matter what you do, some people are going to get infected. The question is, who's going to take
care of those who are already infected?
All right, unfortunately, we are running
and
low on
we have
time.
so many of them.
And I want to ask you one more thing before I let you go, because I mean, you were known for many things.
Oh my God.
Okay, the list is almost infinite. But one of the things you are known for in your own country and across Africa is as one of the great Catholic campaigners against corruption.
Oh yes.
You have put your finger on corruption as one of those cancers eating away at the stability of many African societies, including your own. Okay. Now I want to ask you about your own country, Nigeria. I was in Nigeria, 18 months ago, when General Buhari came to power. There was great optimism back then that he was going to clean up the whole corruption mess. Okay, where do things stand today? And in general, how effective is the church in Nigeria in holding this government accountable to get serious about corruption?
Oh, you use the right words to get. Let me say, maybe the word is not serious, but let's say to get effective.
Yeah.
In his fight against corruption. There's no doubt that the promise of tackling and dealing decisively with corruption, which was campaign promise of Buhari, moved a lot of people to vote for him, including me. I can now say very clearly that I voted for Buhari.
And we should say that General Buhari is a Muslim.
A Muslim, yes. And there was a lot of campaign from the other side that if you vote for Buhari, you are voting for the Islamization of Nigeria.
Right. You're voting for Sharia.
But again, if you vote, a lot of us believe that our good Christian presidents have had 12 years time to show how wonderful Christian presidents can perform.
And haven't really pulled it off.
And I'm afraid we don't have too much to be proud of.
Yes, in fact, I mean, just so people know, I mean, you essentially helped shame one of those Christian presidents into not trying to play around the Constitution, President Obasanjo, to give himself a third term. And that famous, it was a Christmas sermon in the National Cathedral.
Yes.
So it's not like you've shown religious bias in the way you criticize governments.
Now, we have the stage we are in now, more than 1 year after the elections of our present president. It started off all right, but then the way he was going about it, we already, right from the word go, began to raise alarm that it doesn't seem we are going about this anti-corruption fight in the right way. It's not enough to arrest a few people, to dig out a few hidden cash. We told them that first, you must handle these anti-corruption cases properly, respecting the rule of law. And secondly, there was a clear feeling that the friends of Mr. President were exempt from harassment.
Yeah.
And that when you are attacking corruption and it appears that you are not impartial in the matter, that itself is even the greatest corruption.
Yeah.
Now we have arrived at a situation where we are now saying that the corruption in Nigeria is endemic, and therefore it's not so much about Mr. X or Mr. Y stealing A or B billions or millions of naira. It's the system itself that is corrupt, which has not yet been addressed.
And okay, and I know
which means the corruption is still going on.
Which means the corruption is still going. And just to bottom line this, when you and I have talked about this in the past, when I have asked you, why is corruption such an important issue to you, right? And to many other African bishops, it's hardly just you. Mm-hmm. The answer I have consistently gotten is that it is key to tackling everything else. I mean, you can't fix poverty, you can't fix illiteracy, and all of that. You could have the greatest foreign aid program in the world. The United States could quintuple the amount it spends on foreign aid next year, and if 3/4 of it is still getting siphoned off and wasted, then what's the point?
Stolen.
So in other words, it is the key to social justice for African societies.
And for a country like Nigeria, where theoretically we're a rich country.
Yeah, I mean, you're awash in oil.
It's not as if we are a poor country with no money.
In principle.
It's a country with a lot of money, and yet we see the indices of poverty, deprivation all over. And which means corruption makes it impossible for the wealth of the nation to be properly distributed. But above all, the corruption means that the people on top who should be taking decisions for the country are all stinkingly rich. That means they are unable to even imagine what my cousins and my brothers at home are going through, and therefore the priorities of government are completely different from the needs of the nation.
Okay, I wish we had 4 more hours to sit here and talk, but unfortunately we've gone over the union rules that I'm allowed to do these shows.
Very good.
Cardinal John Onaiyekan, you are a great campaigner, not merely in the fight against corruption and the fight for democracy, but you are a great campaigner, even when you're not trying, for what the best of the Catholic Church is all about. You are authentic, you are honest, you're a man of integrity, you call it as you see it, you're a great friend, and you're a loyal friend, and you're just my exemplar of what a Catholic bishop should be all about. So thank you for being with us here today.
Let me say one thing.
Yeah.
These 2 days, you know what's been going through my mind?
What?
I've been saying, oh my God, I became a bishop in 1983. Now we're in 2017. Hearing them speaking, I find myself as a frontline actor in this wonderful process of African theology. And it's like a great grace that I will, if I come back again next time to this world, I wouldn't mind having it another.
You can see the second act.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the evolution of African theology has been a grace to you. You have been a great grace to it, and you're a great grace to us. So thank you for who you are and for what you do. You have been watching A Drink with John. Join us next time with another mover and shaker in the Catholic universe. Cardinal John Onaiyekan, thank you.
Thank you.
Join us next time.